And we're back. You're listening to the Exitology Unlock Your Profits, Unlock Your Potential show on the International Business Growth Radio Network. I'm your host, Jason Wally Waldron, and I am thrilled to be joined here today by Ellen Long. And Ellen, we've talked about a number of things, including the three main drivers of business value and how early you should be thinking about your exit, and everything good, bad, and ugly about keeping your management team incentivized and on board with your plans. Now we're going to shift gears a little bit, and I'd like to hear a little bit about what are some of the biggest mistakes that entrepreneurs make when they're transitioning their business.
Yeah, I would say we've talked a lot about outside, but one of the interesting things is we actually help business owners transition to their employees and also to their kids. So we have a lot of people that want their kids to take over.
Cool.
And I would say the number one mistake is really understanding if that person wants the business.
Oh.
So a lot of owners just assume that these people will want the business. So one of the stories, my dad actually worked on this one, but he had an owner that came to him and said, "Hey, I'm going to transition to my key employee. He's the best guy. I love him." And so my dad said, "Well, let me interview him and ask him what his goals are. What does he want for the business? Does he have a vision for the business?" No, don't worry about it. I already talked to him about it. It's fine. So go through the whole process. And then we're over and over. My dad's asking, are you positive, right? Get to the table, sit down with this employee. The employee looks at my father and says, "I don't want this business." Now, they had been working for almost a year on how to transition the business to this guy. And he looks up and he's like, "I'm out, baby. I'm going to Mexico. I'm going to go surf some waves." So, so number one, having that discussion of, is this something they really want? And I would say the second one is, do they see the business as an owner? You have got to, it takes longer to transition to an inside person than an outside, because you're taking someone with an employee mindset and you're trying to transition them into an owner. And an owner's mindset and an employee's mindset for a business is totally different. You have to train them to have that mindset.
That is really, really important. And so I'm curious, so you talked about the issue of, is the potential recipient of the business, especially in a family situation, are they even open to or interested in becoming that person? And I can see, all of the reasons why they may or may not want to do that. But the second thing that you just said, I think, is even more important, which is, do they have an employee's mindset or an owner's mindset? So bring us a level into that a little bit.
Yeah. So an employee's mindset is, I'm doing this job and I'm done. An owner's mindset is, I have a vision for the company. I understand how the business works. Mm-hmm. I understand the processes and the procedures and the jobs. And I'm also a leader. And I think that's a huge part too. So just a quick story, we had a father-son. It was actually a second to third generation, which is fun.
Oh, that's a sticky wicket.
It was a sticky, but so fun. And we came to the second generation. He said, "I want to transition and I want my son to lead this company in 3 years." Well, we look at his son, and his son is like a salesperson. Now, this is a $80 million company. So to go from, salesperson manager to CEO of a company in 3 years, that's quite the jump. So we basically built a plan for the third generation to learn about the business and learn about the different parts of the business, start shadowing his dad, learning how to see the company financials, understanding the leadership team. Because, and even this too, you can learn the second generation, right? He learned how the second generation saw that company.
Right.
But you're going to have a different company. You're going to grow a different company. You're going to lead a different company than the generation above you. Yep. You have to, or you're not going to survive, because the market changes, the business landscape changes. You're going to build a different company. But understanding it and then changing it is really that transition.
Yep.
And so being able to help them and train them through that and see if they have the capabilities during that training process, and if they have the capacity to be able to do that, is massive.
I want to speak to how hard this is, because, this isn't just for the average bear here. I mean, you can go back and look at the history of literally Ford Motor Company and find out how tough it was for them. There was a period of time where they were going through a CEO a year for a number of years before another Ford finally was able to step up and take the reins of this company. And it has nothing to do with, any of the other externalities of history, you know, between the Rust Belt and the Japanese cars and all this other stuff. It's just to learn how to lead a company that's huge and all of the things you need to know. This is not an overnight situation. And so I really have to give it, you know, my hat's off to you all for first even taking on that type of project, let alone being able to shepherd someone through that.
Yeah, and honestly, it's been such a cool story for us. It's been a massive success. The third generation has absolutely exceeded even our expectations. He's, I think, now 5 times the company, and just has this big goal. And he's built a totally new management team to support him. He's really taken the business to the next level. But again, like being able to go, it takes a certain type of person, and not everyone can do that. So I would say, just real quick, I would say one of the biggest mistakes entrepreneurs make too is they give the company away before that person is ready to take it over. Okay. So we always say you should de-risk this as much as you can, meaning you don't just give the company 100% over. So we also do a transition period. So the third generation still doesn't have more than 50% control of this company, even though he's grown it 5 times. Along the way, we've been giving more and more and more shares to him. And as he's expanded and grown, he gets more. So you don't do 0 to 100 for the most part, unless you're completely selling the company for cash and they get a loan, that's great. But if there's anything left, any shares that you have left, or a loan that you have from the employee directly, well, we should be giving those shares over time. It should be a de-risking way of doing it. We shouldn't do it all at once.
That's really cool, because it really forces that person, you know, the person who's on the ascent to really be in it for the long term to win it, and really they have to earn their keep just like the previous generations did. And then I can definitely see how it keeps them accountable to the previous generations, all that value that was created.
Sure.
I'd be curious using this as an example, because this is a very interesting case study you're taking us through. Was there one moment where maybe you and Randy Long of Long Business Advisors, was there one moment where the two of you said, this is going to work? Like,
yeah, it was when he came into our office and we were interviewing him, and we said, what's your vision for this company? What's your goal? And he looked at us and he says, I know the proverb. I know the parable that shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 years. And I do not want to be that. And I will do what it takes so that this company grows and that I don't become that statistic.
Wow.
And we looked at him and we're like, that's the guy that's going to make this happen.
Yep.
He's like, I'm not going to be this statistic.
That is the guy. That's amazing. And I'll tell you, we've recently started working with a third generation ownership bench, and it took them 10 years to get ready to work with us, because they were going through the navigation of everything you're just talking about right now, which was how do we make sure we're not a statistic?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's so much to that. That is really cool. So one other thing here that I know you look at with businesses, and I'm gonna shift gears slightly on us here, but scaling to sell a business versus creating a lifestyle business. Can you exit either business?
Yeah, so they are 2 totally different goals. You can still exit a lifestyle business, but you're basically trying to do 2 separate things. So when you're trying to sell a business, you're building it in a way that is going to look really beautiful to a buyer. You're setting all this stuff in place. A lifestyle business is set up to really squeeze as much money out of that business as possible. So a lot of times you're not reinvesting as much, because you're just making your profit margins basically as high as you can. And you're building it in a way where it supports you and your lifestyle and your family more than you're scaling it to sell. So usually your goals are a little bit different. Your tax strategies are different. Even your estate planning is different, because you realize this is a company I'm not going to be able to sell. So I'm going to make the most of that company as much as I possibly can.
And do you see, so we work with a lot of custom manufacturers and folks like that. So it sort of it doesn't go without saying, but most of the folks that we work with are definitely, they're growing it to sell it at some point, because of all the moving parts, because of the capital requirements, because of all the employees, because of all of the things. I'd be curious, because you serve a lot of different markets that are different than who we primarily serve. Is there is it 70-30? Is it 50-50? Like, how do you see the marketplace going as far as folks who are building lifestyle businesses versus building them to sell?
Well, I would like all lifestyle businesses to build their company in a way that they could sell it if they chose.
Sure.
So ultimately, we try to help people take their lifestyle businesses and make it a business that could be sold. A lot of times you'll see this with personal brands. If it's all built around one person, right? And a lot of times those end up lifestyle because it's hard to sell that. However, we had a client who came to us and said, I have a lifestyle company, I have a personal brand, how can I build this to sell? And we basically started transitioning. There's a woman, actually, she focuses on this, rebranding into that. So rebranding from a personal brand into a company brand, because we can sell the company. So it's definitely something that you can do. And I will say this too, even with the insiders, you should build your company to sell to a third party, even if you're planning on transitioning to your kid or your employee. And the reason is, number one, that company is going to be a better company, period. And number two, if that person, because we have seen this where employees will say, yeah, I want the business, and they get to the dotted line of taking risk and putting their capital on the line and their future on the line. And that is a big step for employees to go from, a solid salary to now the risk of a business.
Right.
And we have where they get to that line and they can't sign on the dotted line. They can't do it.
Wow.
And so when that happens, if you've built it to sell, we flip it. We're like, great, well, let's go sell it to a third party.
Right.
Boom. And we're ready. So having that as a backup plan, even if you're transitioning, is still a better plan.
Well, let's let the folks. Where do they find out more about Ellen Long and Long Business Advisors? Give them one more.
So you can go to longbusinessadvisors.com. You can download our 3-year checklist / your extraordinary exit. You can find me on Instagram, Ellen Long Style. You can find us on LinkedIn. We're pretty much we're honestly not huge on socials, only because all of our business is really referrals and people like you. So
awesome. Well, thanks for being on the show today, folks. You've been listening to the Exitology Unlock Your Profits, Unlock Your Potential show on the #1 global talk and news network on the internet, IBGR, International Business Growth Radio. We'll see you next time.